Okay, so another video on the Middle East topic. This one is going to be looking at, as you can see here, Palestine, obviously, the impact of the First World War and the British Mandate. Now, just before I get into this one, I'm intending for this video to kind of be a part one of two, because the stuff I'm going to talk about today is quite complex. I understand that, year 11 is quite daunting. We've started this new topic and a lot of you are finding it a bit challenging, a bit daunting, which, is understandable. So this is kind of a part one of part two. I'm going to look, as it says in the title, I'm going to look at the impact of the First World War and the British Mandate, what that was, and kind of the immediate impact of the British Mandate. And then I'm hoping over the next day or two to do another video talking about what happened in the 1930s, kind of moving through things like the Arab Strike and the Peel Commission and the Arab Revolt, which I know you guys have read about already in the textbook. So I'm hoping to do a video on that bit. As I say, in the next couple of days, but I'm going to do this video looking, as I say, at the impacts of the First World War and the British Mandate, explaining what it was. So, let's go straight into it. Let's go back. In our last lesson, the last lesson that we did yesterday, we looked at the three agreements that Britain in particular had made to do with Palestine and the Middle East. There was the McMahon-Hussein Agreement in 1915, which promised Palestine to the Arabs. Then we looked at the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which would essentially leave Palestine in the hands of the British and the French, more or less. And then the Balfour Declaration in 1917, where the British suggested that they would allow Zionists to set up a Jewish state in Palestine. There is a video on that, so go and find that video if you haven't seen it already. So all of these agreements happened during the First World War, obviously 1915, 16 and 17, which, as you guys know, was during the First World War. So after the war, Britain was given the mandate to rule over Palestine. Now, a mandate, as you can see here, is the official permission to govern a territory that had previously been ruled by someone else. In Palestine's case, Turkey. So Britain have got the permission, the official permission by the League of Nations to govern, look after a territory, a place, in this case Palestine, that had previously been governed by somebody else. It had been under the ownership on the rule of the Turks or the Ottomans, whichever you want to use. Now, as part of this mandate, the terms of the mandate for Britain were, they had to, as you can see here, protect the rights of the Palestinian Arabs. They had to also establish a homeland for Jews and prepare the country for independence. Now, look at that. How on earth are Britain supposed to do those three things all at once? It's basically impossible, because really, particularly these two things here, contradict each other. Is it going to be an Arab state or a Jewish state? It can't really be both, as you guys know already from what we've looked at. So, making it an Arab state and a Jewish state, well, that doesn't work. So what was the response is kind of the next thing you need to be aware of. What was the response to the British Mandate? What was the response? Well, the Arabs in particular were furious. They were absolutely furious. The McMahon-Hussein Agreement obviously had promised them an independent Palestine, an independent Arab Palestine, and they hadn't been given this. So, many Arabs were going, what's going on? We were promised an independent Palestine that we could, live in and control and rule over, as part of the McMahon-Hussein Agreement, and that hasn't happened. They'd also not been consulted about the second part of the mandate, the whole bit about establishing a homeland for the Jews. They hadn't been consulted about that, so that was news to them. And again, the Arabs were going, what? This is meant to be an Arab homeland, if you will, not a Jewish homeland. So they were really, really angry about that, and that would lead to violence in the near future. I'll talk a little bit about that violence in this video, but I'm going to talk about it more in the next video. So that was the Arab response, one of anger and shock and confusion. For Zionist Jews, the British Mandate was good news, really, as it brought them closer to achieving what they wanted. an independent Jewish state. Zionist Jews, as you know, they want an independent Jewish state that they can live in, free of persecution. And, you know, clearly the British mandate, given that Part 2 is the whole thing about establishing a homeland for the Jews, you know, that got them a step closer. So they were happy. They were happy. To the point where the Jewish Agency, which was, as you can see here, an organisation in Palestine which represented Jewish interests, so Jewish people who lived in Palestine set up this Jewish Agency, which encouraged more immigration of Jews from around the world to Palestine. So they were kind of encouraging more and more Jewish people to come to Palestine. It also helped them to buy land and organise schools when they arrived in Palestine, and basically kind of helped them settle in. And all this kind of encouragement that the Jewish Agency were giving to Jews from around the world to come to Palestine led to a massive increase in Jewish immigration. And here's some figures for you. I'll leave this up here so you can have a good look at it. It led to the number of Jews in Palestine rising from, as you can see here, 84,000 in 1922, which was around about 11% of the population, give or take. So they went from 84,000 in 1922 to 9 years later in 1931, 175,000 Jews in Palestine. So you can see here the amount of Jewish immigration went up massively. And then further to that, between 1933 and 1935, another 135,000 Jews arrived in Palestine. Many of them were fleeing from Nazi Germany, which you guys are well aware of because we've obviously looked at Nazi Germany as part of the Germany topic. So you can see here a huge increase in Jewish immigration. And as it says there, by 1936, more than a quarter of Palestine's population was Jewish. So it went from about 11% of the population to over 25% of the population. Now, all of this created a lot of tension between Jews and Arabs in Palestine. And from the early 1920s onwards, there was violence as a result of that tension. As a result of the violence and what some Jews perceived as a lack of protection from the British, they said, Arabs are attacking us and we're not being protected by the British, a Jewish organisation known as the Irgun was formed there. And the Irgun, their main kind of goal, if you will, was they were dedicated to forming a Jewish state, an independent Jewish state, using violence if necessary. They're essentially a terrorist group who are dead set on creating this Jewish state. So they're obviously a Zionist group, and they're dead set on setting up this Jewish state in Palestine, even if it means using violence. So that's kind of the start of the violence, the early 1920s, where there are clashes between the Arabs and the Jews, and that grows and gets a lot more serious as we move into the 1930s. But as I say, I'm going to cover that in another video. You guys should be aware of it already because we've read about it in the textbook, but I'm going to cover that detail in the next video, which hopefully I'll get up in the next day or two. Right, hopefully people are a little bit more comfortable with what the British mandate was and what happened as a result of it from this video. As I say, another one coming up very soon talking about what happens in the 1930s, looking at the Arab strike and the Peel Commission and the Arab Revolt. So keep your eyes peeled for that. As always, any requests for videos, just leave a comment below. But as I say, hopefully that's been helpful, and I will see you all very soon. Thank you.